Long ago, in a realm of craggy cliffs and windswept olive groves, people whispered about a queen who commanded a flock of crows as dark as midnight. Her domain lay beyond a treacherous pass in the mountains, and rumour held that she had knowledge of every secret uttered, no matter how carefully one guarded the words. Sailors who anchored near those shores claimed they saw black wings overhead, swirling in spirals, an omen of dread and hidden truths. Citizens of nearby city-states told each other terrifying stories of a queen who had once been mortal, yet somewhere along her path she courted powers that no other soul should have dared approach. Her name was once Antheria, the daughter of a humble fisherman and a woman who was believed to have distant ties to divinity. Growing up near the sea, Antheria displayed curiosity and a hunger for knowledge from a young age. Some said she was favoured by Hermes, the messenger god, for she ran swiftly and spoke with disarming cleverness. Others suspected something darker teased the corners of her mind. As she matured, her fascination with the unknown grew. She travelled to the grand city of Thespidus, forging friendships with scholars and orators. Whispers trickled through the city that this bright young woman was not content with mortal accomplishments. She sought secrets that lay buried in the deepest recesses of the world. Antheria visited an old temple dedicated to Moros, an ancient deity associated with doom and destiny. She lingered there for days, studying half-effaced inscriptions and offering prayers to the statue of Moros, whose face was chipped away by centuries of salt-laden wind. On the final night of her visit, a mysterious voice beckoned her deeper into the temple's bowels. There, among tomb-like corridors, she found a hidden alcove containing a single black feather, unnaturally glossy in the glow of flickering torches. That night, in a dream, Moros appeared to her, robed in swirling shadows. He made her an offer. The knowledge of all men's and women's secrets would be bestowed upon her, but it would come at a dreadful price. For every secret gleaned, something precious would be stripped away. A thirst for power burned in Antheria's heart, and though she hesitated, she yielded to her desire, vowing to accept whatever price the deity required. When she awoke the next morning, the black feather lay in her hands, as though planted there by some cryptic hand of fate. She tried to leave the temple, but the crows were already following. Two of the inky birds perched on the temple's entrance, tilting their heads at her, silent, yet menacing. Another landed on her shoulder while she trudged the mountain road back to her home. It was on that arduous walk that Antheria realized she could hear whispers, carried on the wind, as though the spirits of passers-by spoke into her ear. Secrets of trivial nature, spurned lovers, stolen coins, now unspooled in her mind, weaving a tapestry of revelatory knowledge. She told herself it was a blessing. Yet each night she dreamed of Moros, who recited cosmic truths in a language that slithered through her head like a serpent. She discovered the more secrets she gathered, the more her humanity ebbed away, replaced by cold detachment. A gloom took root in her spirit, repelling her neighbours. She was not unkind, but her eyes took on a distant gleam, as if she beheld realms beyond mortal sight. Soon she found she could no longer remain among ordinary people. Departing the bay of her childhood, Antheria moved inland to a fortress perched on a crag. Its towers were said to be a vantage from which one could spy not only the entire region, but also the realm of spiritual shapes drifting above the horizons. This fortress had once belonged to a minor king, but rumour had it that the king fell into madness. Antheria, as though drawn by some invisible cord, took up residence in the abandoned fortress. There, crows nested atop spires and flooded the parapets in a swirling mass of black feathers. By day they fanned out across the land, silent watchers over farmland, markets and private courtyards. In the evenings they came back, raining down messages upon their mistress, each revealing new secrets gleaned. As time passed and tales spread of the Crow Queen's wickedness, she emerged rarely and only on moonless nights. Her hair, once as warm as honey, had turned a burnished black, blending into the swirling flock around her. And while the realm reeled with rumors, some swore she traded secrets with demons or coerced them from the unsuspecting courtiers of nearby lordships, whispered that if you sought knowledge of your enemies, you need only approach the Crow Queen in her mountain keep. But a warning always accompanied those hushed discussions. To stand in her presence was to bear the weight of her scrutiny. She saw everything. She judged everything. To bargain with her was akin to unveiling one's soul, offering yourself fully to her gaze. A minor warlord named Calais once ventured to Antheria's fortress. He arrived flanked by a handful of soldiers and came bearing priceless gifts. Golden bracelets, rare spices, a silver mirror rumoured to show the future. Though the queen rejected the gifts, she agreed to listen to his plea. He sought advantage over a rival city-state, begging her to uncover the general's secret battle plans. Wordlessly, Antheria touched the black feather she always kept bound to her belt, and at once a flurry of crows poured from the fortress windows. They streamed into the horizon, disappearing like drifting shadows. Calais waited in the courtyard for 3 days, anxious and skittish. On the dawn of the 4th day, the crows returned in a mass of shrieks and fluttering wings. The queen emerged, her eyes vacant. She relayed to Calais exactly how his rival hoped to invade. Overjoyed, Calais bent the knee, praising her and promising further tribute. But Antheria demanded only one payment from him, a single truth. He must confess his deepest, most guarded secret. At first, the warlord stood defiant, but the crows closed in, their beady eyes fixed upon him. "My father," Calais stammered. "He died not by accident. He paused, choking on his own words. "I arranged his death because I wanted to rule in his place. I have borne that guilt in my heart for years." His voice cracked, tears slipping from his eyes. At that exact moment, one of the crows plucked a single hair from his head and fluttered toward its mistress, dropping the hair into her slender hand. Antheria nodded, a faint pang of regret flickering across her face. "Your secret belongs to me now," she said. Humbled, Calais departed. True to her word, the Crow Queen gave him the advantage in battle. But, from that day onward, Calais' nights became plagued by nightmares in which he saw the queen's crows perch silently on the foot of his bed, staring with cold, knowing eyes. In time, his city-state triumphed by using the stolen knowledge, but the warlord's insomnia and guilt corroded his success. Within a year, he threw himself from the city walls, crying out that the crows would never cease tormenting him. It was the queen's plight that all secrets once known gnawed at her spirit. She stored them somewhere deep within, an ever-growing labyrinth of hidden stories and confessions. In them, she found fleeting empowerment, though each new revelation weighed on her cursed soul. No matter how often she subjugated the crows or stared into the ominous skies, she would not free herself from the burden. Her voice grew hollow, and even in her fortress of shadow, she shivered with the knowledge her watchers brought each day. One autumn, an old oracle named Pelenar arrived unannounced. She came with no entourage or armed guard, only a small donkey bearing baskets of meager provisions. Wrinkles carved deep furrows in the oracle's face, and her cataract-clued eyes gave the impression that she was blind. But her voice was commanding as she stood outside the fortress gates and demanded an audience. Intrigued, Antheria allowed her to enter. Inside the wind-swept courtyard, Pelina produced a small clay jar adorned with intricate symbols of swirling birds. She said she sought to free the queen from a curse that should never have fallen to a mortal. Antheria's crow watchers circled above, and the queen stood on the upper steps, unreadable expression etched into her pallid features. "How do you propose to free me?" the queen asked, the hush of her voice punctuated by the cawing of crows. Pelena's eyes flickered with a gentle light. "By returning the darkness to its source," she replied. Moras is an ancient power, but even he cannot hold what was not his to begin with. There is a reason he grows his domain through mortal bargains. We must break the cycle. You must be the one who pries open the gateway." Antheria said nothing. She led Polina into a desolate hall, lined with columns of cracked marble. There, the crows perched on rafters, silent witness to the conversation. The oracle pried open the clay jar, releasing a thin spiral of incense. She chanted in a language lost to most ears, calling upon the old gods to intervene, to remind Moros of his rightful boundaries. As the fragrance of incense filled the air, Antheria felt a tremor in her chest, as though her heart pulsed with some foreign force. The crows grew restless, flapping and screeching overhead. "Enough," Antheria hissed, pressing her hand to her chest. The pain was almost intolerable. "I know you mean well, Oracle, but the secrets have fused to my very bones. Taking them away will tear me apart." "And so you must be torn," Polina said with resolute calm. "But from that rending, you may be born anew." For a flicker of a moment, the queen considered. Yet her fear and her addiction to the power she wielded tangled inside her. She gestured sharply, and the crows descended in a carefully coordinated attack, swirling around the oracle. Each bird flapped its wings just inches from Polina's face, screeching a shrill protest. Though the oracle seemed unafraid, her chanting faltered until silence overtook the hall. She lowered the jar with a mournful expression. "Very well," she conceded, her voice tinged with sorrow. "The choices of the cursed are often the saddest. But you have not heard the last of me, nor the last of the gods' design." With that, Polina departed, never once looking over her shoulder. Many said she roamed the countryside, telling those she met that the queen's downfall was inevitable. Seasons changed. The fortress soon became the backdrop for a new wave of petitions. Neighboring rulers, desperate lovers, cunning thieves, all came in search of knowledge. One by one, Antheria demanded a secret in exchange for her help, each confession stored away inside her. Her hold on the region tightened. No traitor, conspirator, or hidden object could escape her watch. It was said that when she slept, her eyelids fluttered with the swirl of 1,000 half-formed nightmares, each carrying the face of someone who had once whispered their darkest fear or sin. One evening of cold drizzle, a stranger arrived at the fortress gates. He came cloaked in a thick woolen garment, his face half concealed by the hood. He introduced himself as Theron, a wandering poet who wished to compose an ode about the queen's extraordinary power. Intrigued by the notion of flattery, Antheria allowed him entrance, though her crows loomed menacingly overhead. Theron was different from the typical supplicants. He asked no boon, needed no secret. Rather, he desired to bear witness, to depict the queen accurately in his verses. Over time, the queen found his calm presence oddly soothing. He was polite, never prying for knowledge. Instead, he aimed to capture her image through gentle, poetic lines. He said that rumor painted her as a foul sorceress, heartless and twisted by malice, but he wished to write the truth. "You do not fear me?" Antheria asked, hearing her own voice echo in the vaulted corridors. "Fear, yes, but only in the way men fear storms or the hunger of the sea," he replied. "I know your power, but I also sense a spark of sorrow behind it." She frowned. "You believe there is sorrow within me?" "I do not simply believe it, I see it. A soul burdened by countless secrets that do not belong to her must inevitably drown in sorrow." At this, Antheria said nothing. In the flickering torchlight, she felt her defenses slip momentarily. The crows perched in a ring, quietly watching. She knew some part of her had longed for an absolution that her pride would not let her pursue. Over the passing weeks, Theron remained in the fortress, observing the queen's comings and goings. He listened as supplicants arrived, glimpsed their uneasy confessions, and watched the crows vanish into the horizon. Late at night, he gathered fragments of his poem, writing by scant candlelight. Sometimes he offered small gifts, a fresh sprig of lavender to scent the musty halls, a perfectly round pebble polished by the river's current. They were humble, far from the gilded trinkets of warlords and aristocrats, yet they touched something in the queen that she had forgotten existed. And Theria's crows, too, seemed to tolerate him, allowing the poet to study their inky feathers without snapping at him. Theron never asked for anything until the night a tremor rocked the fortress. The mountains seemed to groan, and thunder rumbled across the sky, though no lightning flashed. Down in the valley, the lights of distant villages flickered in panic, and Theria felt a wash of dread. She ascended the highest tower, crows swirling around her in a black halo, scanning the horizon. Through the gloom, she saw a shape drifting between the clouds, a colossal shadow that resembled the silhouette of a winged figure. Moros. The deity had come to reclaim a debt. The crows screeched in horror. Fear welled in Antheria's chest, an emotion she rarely permitted herself to feel. She braced against the tower's railing as the swirling winds nearly knocked her off balance. Somewhere behind her, Theron watched, clutching a torch whose flame danced precariously. "He's here," the queen murmured. "For you?" Theron asked, stepping closer. "Or for all you have taken?" And Theria didn't answer. She could sense Moros's presence beckoning her, demanding the full surrender of her mortal shell for the price of 1,000 stolen secrets. The tears that rose in her eyes were overshadowed by a fierce determination. She whirled around, grasping Theron's arm with sudden urgency. "I have no illusions that I can elude him," she said, voice trembling. "But I no longer wish to drown in these chains. Perhaps I can break them before he seizes me for all eternity." For a moment, conflict raged behind her gaze. She recalled Pelena's attempt to help, the incense swirling, the chant undone by her own fear. She remembered how Moros's bargain haunted her every step, how her greed led her down this road, and then she stared into Theron's eyes, which reflected only compassion. "Do you still wish to write your poem?" she asked. Theron nodded, solemn but unafraid. "I do. I ask you, then, to bear witness to what I will do next." And Theria descended the tower and made her way to the desolate hall where Pelena had once performed her ritual. She kindled torches along the stone walls, summoning every ounce of determination she possessed. The crows followed, a noisome swirl overhead. Thunder rumbled again, and the air thickened with a sense of impending doom. Gripping the black feather at her belt, Theria summoned the memory of Pelena's incantation. Without the oracle's guidance, she did her best to replicate the chant. She spoke incantations to the old gods, calling them to witness her release from Moros's claim. Her words echoed violently, shaking loose dust from the high rafters. She felt the labyrinth of secrets inside her surge, a maelstrom of guilt and stolen truths that battered her resolve. But she continued the chant, voice quavering yet unwavering in purpose. Darkness pooled in the corners of the hall, coalescing into a shade that slowly took the form of Moros. Though ethereal, the deity's presence struck fear into the hearts of mortal beings, and even Theron shuddered, torchlight flickering across his resolute. The crows hissed and screeched, scattering to the rafters in panic. With trembling hands, Antheria finished the final line of Pelena's chant. She raised the black feather to Moros, a silent plea for release. The deity stood, eyes like fathomless pits. Then, impossibly, it spoke, its voice resonating from unseen depths. "All these secrets, earned by your greed, are now part of your soul," Moros intoned. "You have transgressed the mortal boundary, daughter of fishermen, and your penance shall be everlasting." And Theria steadied herself. "I return the secrets to the realms from which they were stolen. Let them disperse into the cosmic tide. Leave me with nothing if you must, but free me." A sudden wind tore through the hall. The crows above shrieked, buffeted by the swirling gusts. One by one, as if summoned, the secrets that once nestled in Antheria's mind erupted in a cacophony of disembodied voices. Murmurs of betrayal, confessions of love, hush-hush deals, broken vows, all poured from her in an unseen torrent. Her body convulsed, and she collapsed to her knees in racking sobs. Helpless, Theron reached out, but an invisible force repelled his attempts to steady her. Morris watched, impassive, as the secrets fled from Antheria's spirit, unraveling like a spool of black thread. Her eyes rolled back, the torment nearly consuming her. At last the wind subsided, the voices faded into the air, and the crows fluttered down to the floor, gasping as if they too had been cleansed of some oppressive weight. Antheria slumped forward, and Theron rushed to cradle her. Morris's shape began to waver, as though it were only a reflection on a midnight lake. In a voice that carried a subtle note of grudging respect, Morris spoke once more. "The measure of your ambition was great. Know that only your willingness to forsake it withheld my final judgment. Perhaps in the eternity to come you and I shall meet again. But for now, your sacrifice stays my hand." With that, the shadowy form melted into the darkness, and the hall grew still. Antheria lay exhausted in Theron's arms, the black feather crumbling into ash. The crows huddled in the corners, their glossy feathers subdued. A fine drizzle of dust fell from the rafters. At dawn, the poet helped the queen to her feet. Gone was the regal aura that once cloaked her, replaced by a quiet humility. She no longer heard the incessant swirl of commandeered secrets. Her eyes, once luminous with arcane knowledge, now glinted with something simpler and entirely human. She noticed an ache in her heart, as if the emptiness left behind still pined for the missing secrets. But she knew that hunger would fade with time, and in its place might blossom the capacity for true empathy. Working carefully, she and Theron opened all the fortress gates, allowing the crows to fly free. The birds named for her dominion no longer bowed to an unnatural bond. Some hopped hesitantly outside, while others soared into the morning sky with shrill caws that sounded eerily triumphant. Watching them depart, Antheria felt part of her broken curse lifting from her shoulders. Bringing in supplies, she and Theron began the slow work of reviving the fortress from neglect. Though most of its chambers would likely remain barren, they cleaned a modest section for living. To curious travelers who ventured up the mountains, they offered hospitality but no longer bartered in secrets. When asked if she still commanded a murder of crows, the former queen only smiled faintly and explained that she had set them free. Of course, rumors endured. Some travelers asserted they saw ghosts wandering the fortress corridors, perhaps the remnants of secrets violently ripped from the queen's mind. Others claimed that her power slumbered, waiting to be awakened by a new bargain struck with dark forces. Yet many who actually met Antheria after her renunciation described her quite differently. A thoughtful, quiet woman with a gentle sadness in her eyes, as if she had once witnessed every sorrow under the sun and longed for redemption. Theron wrote his ode, capturing the breadth of her journey. In his verses, she was not a demon, but a tragic figure whose thirst for knowledge invited curses beyond her understanding. He told how the crows, once instruments of her dominion, scattered across the region, no longer under her command, but free to roam as nature ordained. The poem ended with a quiet reflection. Sometimes the greatest wisdom lies not in knowing every secret, but in surrendering the desire for them. In the years that followed, Antheria lived a life much closer to the ordinary. She tilled a small garden near the fortress walls and tended olive trees that thrived in the rocky soil. When storms came, she looked to the sky and recalled the old terror of seeing Moros looming there. But the wind carried no whispers anymore, only the gentle echo of new beginnings. Occasionally, a crow or two would stop by, perching on a broken parapet, cocking its head at her. She could not say whether they remembered the bond they once shared, or whether they simply found comfort in a familiar roost. Nonetheless, she greeted them kindly, offering seeds or breadcrumbs. Though she never told him so, Antheria credited Theron's kindness with reawakening the last shred of her humanity. She regaled him with tales from her distant past, remembering her fisherman father, her mother's half-divine rumours, and the day she first felt bound to something greater than herself in Morris's temple. He listened without judgment, weaving the threads of her story into new lines of verse. Over time, their companionship grew, transcending the need for secrets. They built a fragile, hopeful life among the fortress ruins, carrying only the truths they were willing to share freely. Eventually, word spread that the Crow Queen was no more. The city-states shifted in their petty rivalries, forging alliances or trading new enmities. Spies, ambassadors, and mercenaries replaced the once constant stream of petitioners seeking hidden knowledge. The name, Antheria, lingered for a while on the tongues of gossips, yet it gradually faded, replaced by new myths more urgent to a new generation. Only the faraway rumour persisted that high in the mountains, among broken battlements, lived a woman who once knew every secret in the land and willingly let them go. In this quiet life, freedom came at last. Whatever else might have happened, Antheria found she could smile again without the shadow of hidden knowledge darkening her brow. On the mountain breezes, the cawing of crows was no longer an omen, but simply part of nature's chorus. She listened to their calls with something close to gratitude, thinking of everything she had lost and gained in the swirling passage of those black-feathered guardians. And each time she closed her eyes, she thanked whatever faint, ancient mercy had led her to relinquish the dark gifts bestowed by Moros. In that surrender, she discovered a deeper truth. Secrets may grant power, but letting them go is what finally grants peace.